Today we're presenting how business owners can mash up Agile and the 4Qs frameworks. Many business owners are aware of the benefits of Agile, and a few might know about the power of the 4Qs. What you may not be aware of is how useful it is to mash the two frameworks together. I have with me on this podcast a man who is familiar with both frameworks. He's going to teach us how it's done. Welcome, Wouter Delbaere.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited about this.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and your love affair with Agile.
Yeah, so really, I've been doing software since I was about 17, pretty much. And I've always been very fascinated how lines of code actually convert into an actual user experience. Ages ago, I joined a Scrum Master course, a certification course. And I came in not really knowing much about it. And on day one, I was just blown away and could, by the whole concept and the whole philosophy behind it, I could relate to it so much. And since then, it really changed the way I approach software development in general, but actually also certain things in life which have nothing to do with software development. Just a very good way of building stuff and going through life.
But it is not often that I meet somebody with such experience in Agile. Before we get too far into our mashup together, why don't we ask you, Wouter, to give our audience a crisp 30-second explanation of why Agile?
Look at the traditional way of software development, which we typically call waterfall, where everything happens in one big splash, right? It starts with a lot of upfront, front-loaded planning. And then there's a whole sequential flow of inception, analysis, design, development, deployment. And really the consequence of taking that approach is you only have working software very late in the game. Now, and that gives you very weak feedback loops. Now, Agile, on the other hand, takes a completely different approach. It takes iterations, right? And it's really designed to get feedback very early in the game, and to really give the organization a level of agility to make changes as feedback arrives early on.
Okay, thanks. Now, how does Agile connect to Scrum? Are the two related, or they have nothing to do with one another?
Agile is a generic set of principles, while Scrum is a concrete set of rules applying those principles. So almost like an instantiation. But Scrum is not the only way of implementing Agile. There are others out there. You've got others like Kanban or extreme programming and many more. But Scrum is the most popular one.
Let's cast our thoughts and just at least look at one other aspect of Agile, which I think is important, which is the 3 roles of Agile, because that is about to become part of the mashup that we're going to do. So can you talk to us about each of these in turn? We've got the product owner, the team, and the Scrum Master.
You're right. So there are 3 main roles in the Agile world. So one is the product owner, who's accountable for what and why. Then you've got the team, who's accountable for how. The team is also looked upon as a development team, or sometimes called a feature team, but these are pretty much the same thing. And then you finally have the Scrum Master, who I typically look upon as a coach.
I think we're most interested in the product owner and the Scrum team. So I'm thinking what we give our listeners is a quick overview of the 4 Qs. Let me just do that for us, shall I? Quadrant 1 addresses whom we serve. And the remaining 3 quadrants deal with what we're serving the customer, what we share in common with the customer, and how we serve the customer. Now, you've only been using the 4 Qs now for a couple of weeks, and you've already figured out how Agile and the 4 Qs can work together. I mean, what's been how has the 4 Qs helped you thus far?
And actually, it's not just after a few weeks, right? I think after a few minutes, like once I started to understand the fundamentals of the 4 Qs, and when I read the book and then you walked me through it, my immediate intuition was there was a very strong alignment. To me, the one thing that jumped out immediately was Q3. Q3, who we are, and the concept of a shared belief. And what I got out of that is really the importance of a shared belief across the organization, and moving forward, definitely on my future adventures. shared belief is going to be, top priority for me. Probably one of the first things I'll ever do.
Some people begin their journey with the 4Qs in quadrant 2. And interesting, your journey sounds like it's going to start in quadrant 3. So enough said about the 4Qs. Let's show our listeners how Agile, Scrum, and the 4Qs come together in this nice little tight package. After listening to you during the 4Qs overview, I realized that we've been, using Scrum because Scrum works typically in like a 2 to 4 week cycles. And I was like, oh my God, I'm Scrum enabled and I didn't know. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And the fact that you start like with a very specific example, a specific case, is done in a true Agile fashion already, right? That's really the way Agile works. Rather than going big bang, you take a quick example, work through it, and learn from it. So.
Yeah, thank you. I think what was really news to me was being able to make Agile talk to the 4Qs. And this, your diagram is fantastic, the way that you've thought this through, this mashup. Why don't you talk us through the big picture and how and why these two frameworks talk to each other?
Right. So the 4Qs, as you explained earlier, is a more holistic framework to enable startup success, right, across 4 quadrants, which include the market, the product, us as a company, and how you provide services. On the other hand, you have Agile, which is a very specific approach to developing software, right, and really designed for agility. It's very possible to implement these things simultaneously. There's a very good fit. It's almost like they were designed at the same time by the same people. However, where the scope is different, like a good example would be Q3, the 4Qs actually are able to drive the Agile execution.
You've actually worked out a way to lay the Agile methodology over the 4Qs, and let's share what that visual actually looks like. We can see how each of our Agile players, right, the team and the owner, interfaces with one or more quadrants. So left and right are the Agile roles, and in the center we have the 4Qs. As you've described, right, the solid lines represent responsibility and the broken lines, are the support. When I first saw this graphic that you'd created, the 3 things that grabbed me from this mashup were product owners have 2 responsibilities, okay, and the team only has 1. No one has direct responsibility over quadrant 3. That's fascinating. Lastly, a quadrant which I thought would be under the control of the product owner, that being quadrant 4, is actually under the responsibility of the team. Totally unexpected. We are getting to these right now because you've worked out 3 ways that our listeners can squeeze out more out of Agile and the 4Qs. What's the first practice, Wouter?
The product manager, as some call it, the product owner, matches the problem with the product, right? So the market with the actual product, and really that's how Agile works, right? So the product owner owns something called a backlog, contains tangible customer-centric features, and is really designed to ensure that the team is constantly working on the items with the highest market value. Because of the quick feedback cycles, able to validate who the customer really is, not just matching left to right, Q1 to Q2, but actually matching that back from Q2 to Q1.
So making the product owner the Q1 and Q2 leader makes a lot of sense. I think the product owner also addresses who they do not serve and how they govern the limited resources that they have to quickly get to a quadrant 1, quadrant 2 fit. Let's get to our second best practice that we have to offer today. Products and services must be guided by the beliefs of the company. Please do tell.
As you explained to me, and as the book clarifies and explains very well, a shared belief is fundamental, and really using a shared belief throughout the company and throughout the different roles within Agile really is reflected within the output, right? So your products and your services will vary depending on how well you have implemented your shared belief. Some people may say, okay, the product owner, you make sure that there's a shared belief within the company and you make sure that trickles down, but that's not really true. It really falls on everyone's shoulders. And you have to make sure that the right people share that belief, and then you execute Agile with that shared belief applied.
Yeah, when I first saw your mashup, I tried to correct you. I said, "Oh no, no! Look, there's supposed to be a solid line between the product owner to quadrant 3." And he said, "Oh no, let me explain to you, Anthony, how it works." Exactly what you've just said is that it actually falls on the responsibility of everybody. I think if we were to assign a single person, to have the responsibility over quadrant 3, it would be the CEO. It's up to the founder or the CEO of the company to make sure that the beliefs are set and that they hire against those beliefs, not just hiring against technical. Because what's really going to make the quadrant 2, the product service, different is the beliefs of the organization and how those beliefs proliferate quadrant 2 over time.
And maybe to add to that, right, it doesn't matter how smart or hardworking the person is, right? If that person doesn't share the belief of the founder and the CEO, it's futile. And then you don't have to spend time creating the belief. It's there intrinsically.
I like the way you designed the mashup because it really gives an opportunity for the team to correct the owner, to say, listen, hang on, the specification actually is really not in line with the belief of the organization. Let me show you why. Let's jump on to the next and third practice that we're going to share today. I have in front of me, the team is held accountable for delivering the customer experience. Now, this absolutely blew me away because when you first suggested this, I was like, WTF? Could you explain from the perspective of Agile why that's the case?
The way Agile works is the product owner defines what and why. That's his or her accountability. The team is 100% accountable for how, right? And how the full autonomy, full accountability for delivering the product as well as the services surrounding that product.
What surprises me when I work with a lot of business owners is the amount of time that their team puts into the strict development of the core product, but very little time seems to be put into the other components which surround the service of all the things leading up to the actual product, using the product. They don't seem to be rewarded for developing these parts, and perhaps it's because a lot of people are still using the old method of having tasks being delegated as opposed to giving the how over to the team and allowing them to define what that experience would be.
100% agree. The blame is put on the development team. And actually, when you dig deeper, you can't really blame the team if the product owner doesn't do the right thing and give the team the right accountability.
A big challenge that a lot of business owners are facing is how do I get more of my people to interact with customers, because that's a really expensive interaction, right? Getting people to talk to customers, and it can be quite disruptive as well. The way that Christian and I have gotten around that is we'll try and get people from quadrant 2 to host at least one interaction from quadrant 4. Okay, whether it be a deep dive or a demo, something that the product people have to be involved in, so they have some level of contact with a customer.
100% agree. Some people make the mistake of looking at a product owner as the single funnel, right, between the outside world and the team. But that's definitely not the case, right? I mean, the product owner is there to be accountable for the overall ROI. That doesn't mean that he or she is the only interface.
So I understand we have a fourth practice to share with our listeners, but unfortunately we don't have time to cover on the podcast today. So I'll drop the content for the fourth practice on the blog post. See the link below in the description. So thanks very much for joining me today. This has been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed the session, and I can't wait till we unlock the fourth practice. So please head over to onefrictionless.com if you're listening to this cast. I'll link it to the post in the description below. Wouter, it's been a dream having you on the show today, and thank you. And we hope to hear more about the Agile 4Qs mashups that we can do in the future. I think working together, we can continue collaborating and developing this a lot further. So thank you.
Oh, this was a lot of fun. Let's do this again someday. Thanks.